and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Rafae, Iqbal, and in today's show we'll be deliberating on two very important topics. The first concerning Pakistan and Pakistan's economy. With regards to that, we'll be discussing the last bailout if the reforms ensue, as stated by IMF's Mission Director for Pakistan, Nathan Porter. Nathan Porter said that the recent bailout package could be the last if reforms suggested by the International Monetary Fund are sincerely implemented. Pakistan very recently secured a $7 billion extended fund facility from the IMF, which Islamabad was seeking for some time now. And of course, there were reforms suggested by the IMF that the current government in Pakistan had undertaken as well and are currently undertaking as well. The process is continuing. With regards to the extended fund facility and the loan that Pakistan secured, the interest rate on this loan is less than 5%. With regards to Pakistan's economy and the developments on Pakistan's economic front, the Malaysian Prime Minister is also in Pakistan on a 3-day official visit. And with regards to that, during a ceremony today, he also highlighted the importance of continuity of policies for economic growth and investment. A joint press stakeout was also held between both the premiers, in which the Pakistani Prime Minister and the Malaysian Prime Minister also took part, and both focused on strengthening bilateral relations. With regards to Pakistan's economy, and we go back to it, there were also positive economic indicators that we were witnessing with regards to the cut in the monetary policy rate, the inflation rate coming down, and the international rating agencies giving better credit ratings to Pakistan. That's the first topic. If we talk about the second topic, we'll be talking about the dire situation in the Middle East and, of course, how it has escalated after Iran attacked Israel with a barrage of missiles in retaliation to Israel's expansionism in the Middle East. The world community, as we have seen after this escalation, it stood polarized, and the heightened tensions were also witnessed within the United Nations, as Israel being critical at the United Nations Secretary General and even went a step too far and declared the United Nations Secretary General persona non grata. With regards to that, after this escalation, we saw that the oil prices and the gold prices in the world, they witnessed a surge. The oil prices rising by 3% and the gold prices also marking a significant increase. We'll be deliberating on both these topics and the different aspects related to these topics. In the studios, we've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi. Along with that, we've been joined by geopolitical analyst Faisal. On Skype, we have been joined by Dr. Niaz, Murtaza, political economist. Along with him, we have been joined by Dr. Hasan, Zafar, who is a senior analyst. I'd like to thank you all for your time and being part of the conversation. Starting off from our first topic, which, as the IMF's Mission Director for Pakistan has said, Nathan Porter, that it could be the last bailout package for the country if the suggested reforms are ensued. With regards to that, I'd start off from Dr. Niaz Murtaza. So, what policies do you think by the government are owing to the these positive economic trends? Of course, the cut in the monetary policy rate, the inflation rate coming down, and of course, the securing of this extended fund facility, and the positive remarks by the IMF's mission chief to Pakistan.
Thank you very much. So, in order to understand that question, we have to look at why, this crisis started. Not just this crisis, every crisis that Pakistan has had over the last 2 or 3 decades, what happens is we have a very, a spurt of growth of 2 to 3 years of high growth. But that high growth is not based on increases in investment and productivity. It is based on, having high fiscal deficits, high money supply growth, and a large current account deficits. When you have high fiscal deficits and large money supply growth, what happens is there is growth, but then, inflation also starts going up. When you have high current account deficit, what happens? Your foreign exchange starts falling. And then they keep falling until you reach a stage where you have less than 2 to 3 months of foreign exchange reserve for your imports. And that's when, the panic sets in, and then you have to go back to IMF. And then IMF tells you, your fiscal deficits are too high, your money supply growth is too high, your current account deficits are too high. So you have to jack up your interest rates, you have to, devalue your money, you have to cut your fiscal deficits, and so on. And then, you go through this cycle of 2 to 3 years of severe contraction in order to, contain the excesses that led to the high growth. So this is where we are. We had, this high growth rate of about 6% in 2022. But that again, as the one in 2018 and even under the Musharraf years, was based on the factors that I described rather than investment and productivity. So we've had to, increase interest rates very high. We had to devalue the currency hugely. We had to cut down on our foreign on our fiscal deficits, and all that resulted in huge unemployment, slow growth rate. But then, your inflation started falling down, your devaluation stopped, your foreign currency started increasing. So that's where we have again, gone back to economic stability. But economic stability by itself is not enough. What we need is durable growth, which doesn't result into another crisis. So this is where we have stability. If we now take the right policies, then, we can have growth which doesn't bust your fiscal deficit and so on. So what do we need to do for that? We have to, first of all, increase our exports so that the current account deficit is not there. And then, we have to cut down on our fiscal deficit so that, that high expenditure which leads to inflation, that doesn't happen. So those are the challenges. And now those two steps require a raft of reforms that you need to do, some of which are covered in the program that we have with IMF, especially on the fiscal deficit side. But then other things that we need to do to increase exports are not even covered in the IMF program. So that is the challenge. Those steps Pakistan has to take on its own, identify markets abroad, then, build the capacity of exporters to be able to break into those. So that's a huge task. So if the government is successful in doing that, identifying those sectors that can lead into, large export growth rates so that our current account deficits remain in control, that's one thing. Then the other thing is controlling fiscal deficit, which means finding new sources of tax revenue. So those are the two basic challenges which the government has to now go towards.
Definitely. Dr. Hasan, how would you comment on the points raised by Dr. Niaz with regards to the solutions that Pakistan does need to implement at the moment and the reforms that are suggested by the IMF and, of course, Dr. Niaz as well?
Thank you very much. I think Dr. Niaz has outlined the situation very well already. But we need to look at the important points, the positive steps that the government has already taken following the IMF directions. And we can see the results of that. The Finch and the international agencies, Finch, S&P, and Moody's, they have given positive indications about the direction that the Pakistan government is taking for its economy, which will mean that there will be an easing of the pressure on Pakistan if it wants to acquire further loans from different countries and different sources. So that is one thing. And the lowering of the interest rate will definitely help in expanding business in the country, which will mean greater exports. So these are the areas where clearly government has taken very, very clear positive steps. More than that, we can also see that there are positive indications in the stock exchange today after the bearish trend. 100 points, stock exchange is 100 points up, 750 points test today. So these are that's the situation at large. And we can see, but we will definitely have to see how the government is going to materialize on these this situation which has given some definitely some space to the government to exercise its economic policies. But very importantly, what is important that political stability is ensured in the country, and the kind of opposition we have, it seems quite challenging, and we will have to see how the government is able to control all that, because we have been incessantly talking about it. The lack of political stability will definitely lead to the economic problems, and there has been a combination of bad economic policies and poor, political situation in the country. But we will have to see how the government is able to take both these things together.
Definitely, Farrukh Pitafi, with regards to that, of course, political stability goes hand in hand with economic stability. We know that. Yeah. With regards to that, there's a lot of positive economic indicators that we've been seeing regarding Pakistan's economy. There was the extended fund facility that Pakistan secured. Yeah. But when we talk about and all these point towards Pakistan's path to economic stability, but at the same we see there's of course the spoilers of this progress and of course this path. With regards to that, how would you comment on that? And of course there was also mention of the tax reforms. How do you comment on the challenges being faced by the government regarding these reforms?
Thank you, Rafae, for the question. Need I remind you that this is in third successive economic program that you have actually asked me to comment on taxes. So you are hell-bent on making me a tax man.
You deliberated on it very well.
Yeah, but let me first of all say that I'm really glad that Dr. Niaz Murtaza actually spoke about the sociology of economic crisis in Pakistan. Yeah. We seem to actually keep getting back to the same place, and that is essentially a problem with any import-led economy, right? Mm. But the question right now is, what do we see in the sociology of a solution? What exactly one needs to do? When you are sick, Rafae, God forbid if you have heart trouble or something else, what do? You go to a doctor. You go to a doctor, what does the doctor do? Doctor tells you to cut down various inputs in your body, various things that might actually make you sick. If you're smoking, stop smoking. If you're eating red meat a lot, stop doing that. And then he asks you to stop actually moving around too much, right? At times you're admitted also. IMF is a doctor, and you have gone to the doctor of last resort. So what are they asking you to do? More or less, this is Pakistan's 25th program with the IMF, right? And repeatedly we have been asked to restructure our economy in a way that actually represents what we produce and what exactly do we consume, right? The biggest problem is that our expenditures have always been more than our income, and that creates the fiscal deficit. Similarly, when Dr. Saab was talking about our current account deficit, and particularly because when the growth starts, what happens is that the country starts importing more, and because of that your foreign capital actually escapes the country, flees the country, and after that you have the balance of payment crisis. With that kind of a situation, what are you being asked? You are being asked to focus on fundamentals of economy. You are being asked to correct your direction, and what exactly is that? Does that entail? The first thing that entails is stop spending so much. So what is the deadliest of expenditures? Wherever you don't get developmental benefits, you can actually cut down on that. For example, you can cut down, and we are cutting down subsidies, needless subsidies, generic subsidies. If you are offering something for some kind of cushion for a poor man also, then you are ensuring that the rich also walk away with a lot of dough because of that, right? Similarly, SOEs, state-owned enterprises, are also a big white elephant. They keep on eating so much, and they do not contribute to the economy. So similarly, when you talk about our intakes or our earnings, then what are we doing? We are not expanding our tax base. We were not, right? We are trying to do it now, and the finance minister actually his welcome statement was that Pakistan has increased its tax collection over the past year. So with all those things in the mind, one can say that we are moving in the right direction, but a lot needs to be done. And in the end, when you talk about our economic malaise, our crisis is also of production. What we are producing, what we are exporting. And if you remember, a few weeks ago, we were discussing economics, and I pointed out that our biggest problem is complexity. When a simple thing is being produced, we can do that. For example, we export commodities, agricultural produce, without adding any value. Similarly, so many things could have been done. We haven't created the kind of value chains that are needed, supply chains for that matter, to ensure that we have a complex product that can be exported to the world and which has its unique value. If you don't actually go for value addition, then you are bound to actually keep on repeating the same thing over and over again.
Definitely.
This is the age of complexity. If you want to export anything, you'll have to add value to that. So the biggest problem then becomes how our private sector and how our production or industrial sector is confused about things that need to be produced. Our mentality still remains, Rafae, of herd mentality. We keep on, if you are successful in something, I will open a factory next to yours and produce exactly the same thing. Then Faisal comes along and he adds more to the burden. In the end,
it's
the
like
entire economy tanks.
CNG stations as well, you know.
Yeah, similarly, I mean, that is an example. General Pervez Musharraf has passed, but one needs to ask him or his supporters or people who were with him, what was he thinking introducing CNG kits in the car and then making cars available to everyone, and then ensuring that whatever gas reserves we have is spent on consuming that. So with that, you have actually tanked your resources as well. We will have to reimagine the economy. And I hope our private sector can also play ball. It can also work with us in tandem.
Well, of course, we'll discuss the export factor too. But before that, Raja Faisal, how would you comment, as there's the talk of the private sector as well in the conversation? And when we talk about policies and reforms, of course, the government will have to balance the subsidies with the tax revenue collection, as it has said that it wants to increase the tax net, it wants to increase the tax revenue collection, but at the same time, it wants to facilitate the business, trade and entrepreneurship in the country. How do you see the government balancing both of them?
Yeah, it's a very important question, and I think a point highlighted earlier by Dr. Niaz, it was related to durable growth. I mean, we have to have sustainable, durable growth to, of course, continue the current status of our economy, so that the smooth ride which we are experiencing now, it can continue. But when we, of course, talk about the recommendations which were recommended by IMF to the government to be implemented in the private sector as well, then that seems to be very tricky when it comes to sustainable or durable growth of the economy, because don't forget that the private sector is pivotal. It is like 95% of the economy of the country, and that private sector can of course ensure that the achievements we have so far in our economy, that can be of course continued. Just wanted to mention here, Rafae, that when it comes to recommendations, IMF recommendations, we shouldn't be forgetting that their estimates shouldn't be, of course, taken non-seriously in terms, because they have the experts of every field with them. The top experts of the world, they are actually, outsourced by IMF when they come up with these kind of recommendations. And Pakistan, if has been recommended, and so far the tough decisions which were made by the government, they were in accordance to them recommendation. It means that if we have recovered, and as Dr. Hasan earlier mentioned, Fitch and Moody of course puts us in the positive. Previously we were stable and now we are positive. The only reason behind it is that government, be it the tough decisions they have been making to of course ensure that our economy can stabilize, and that is why we are seeing that the economy is positively stabilizing, and of course we just have to continue this
Momentum.
the sort of recommendations which were implemented, and then reforms. Then we have to continue with this so that we can continuously stabilize our economy, and at the same time the most important is of course the stabilizing the growth, or increasing the growth, or durability must be implemented in that sector as well. That's the only way to go forward. And why growth is pivotal, and it was highlighted by Dr. Niaz earlier, because if growth is positive, then of course we can overcome the extra burdens on our economy as well, in terms of taxes, and in terms of hefty taxes which people at large were paying so far. And I think they can be reduced in future if growth goes smooth. But with that, there would be very important decisions related to, of course, there are many hurdles in terms of attracting FDIs. That is being looked after by SIFC. And if we talk about, there is a large number of population of Pakistan which is relying on the internet to, of course, find a source of earning, and they are contributing throughout the world, and of course that is fetching them money from sitting in Pakistan, working from home. They are doing it, and majority, I mean, I've been told by one of the IT experts very recently that this new trend is so positive because the females are being part of it, because in a country like Pakistan, where it was considered as still considered as a taboo to go to work of females, they can sit at home, they can work from home and still get paid as equal as their men are being paid. So that was a positive side of it, and I think these kind of challenges, that internet shouldn't be hindered. Then when it comes to very important point highlighted by Dr. Hasan related to political stability, as long as you have political stability, people are focused towards how to improve their own economy. Eventually, if they improve their own economy, they are actually contributing positively in the economy of the nation. So that's the way forward.
That's a point that you raised that was very important with regards to women's inclusivity in the system and of course in the workforce. Quaid-e-Azam, he also had the same vision as women playing an important part in Pakistan's economic growth and being a good workforce for the country. Dr. Niaz, coming back to our conversation, there was a mention of the term balance of payments. With regards to that, we've seen Pakistan's major chunk of foreign reserves goes to imports of hydrocarbons. How do you think Pakistan can cut down on that and at the same time add value to its exports?
Well, yeah, that's probably the biggest chunk of our imports, and the prices of those oils, etc. It is so unpredictable that the more you can be self-reliant on it, the better it is for you. And obviously, the way for that is to rely on indigenous sources of power, etc. So, for example, hydro, we have coal reserves, and then renewable sources of electricity like solar, wind, etc. So again, those are the areas. But then obviously you also have to increase your export. And if you ask me, which is the single most important economic indicator, I would say it's not your growth rate, it's your investment GDP ratio. The reason China has been able to have high growth rate for 40 years now is because its investment GDP ratio is 40%. 40% of its GDP is investment. The reason why India and Bangladesh even have been able to have high growth for 20 and 30 years is that their investment GDP ratio is around 30%, and Pakistan's is about 15%, half of what it is for India and Bangladesh. So if you have investment GDP ratio so low, then obviously your growth comes from your high fiscal deficits, money supply growth, and current account deficit. So we have to find ways of, increasing our investment GDP ratio. And it doesn't have to be, foreign investment. You have to, tap local saving as well, because our saving ratio is also so low, around 12 to 13% again. And then once you increase your saving, it has to go into the right channels, into export sectors, and also sectors that reduce your imports. Part of which could be your imports of oil and petroleum, those kind of resources. So it's a huge challenge, and I would say 2 to 3 years is not going to be enough. The challenges are so huge. The repayments are so huge over the next 2 or 3 years. I think in the range of $70 billion, that all of these problems are not going to get resolved in one IMF program of about 3 years. This is going to take, a time horizon of about 5 to 10 years. And that is, the time horizon that the government should focus on, identify export-oriented sectors, and identify import substitution sectors, and take the reforms because of which investment doesn't go into those kind of sectors, and instead of it goes into unproductive sectors like real estate. Now, as Dr. Zafar was saying, the interest rates are going to go down, which will increase investment. But where will that investment go? Will it go into the productive sectors, or will it again go into the unproductive sectors, which don't increase your exports, or which don't reduce your imports? That is the big challenge. There's such powerful anti-reform lobbies in Pakistan, the sugar mafia, this mafia, that mafia, that they don't come under control of any government. In fact, they control all the parties, whether you're talking about PMLN, PTI, PPP. They have huge influence on the policies of these government, whichever one comes and goes, even military governments. So that is the challenge, and I think those kind of reforms take much longer. And as I said, the IMF program, the conditionalities that it will include, will have, maybe just 20-25% of the actual reforms that we need to really spur our export. You hardly see anything in the IMF program which would directly increase your exports. On the fiscal deficit side, yes, you see a lot of emphasis, but then they don't have too many ideas on how you're going to cut your current account deficit by increasing your exports. So that thing is our own challenge. We have to do reforms which are beyond what IMF has told us, and which are included in the
that is,
document that we
I'm again really glad that you're talking about conditionalities also. Earlier you brought up failure of us to save money, right? Domestic savings. And you brought up also interest rate. So my concern was that our interest rate, our policy rate was at record high. Even then we couldn't save. And regarding something else that you just mentioned, conditionalities of IMF, the burden of conditionalities or promises that we make becomes hard to keep. Now the question is regarding this expectation that Pakistan has to show on balance an annual growth of 4.2%. Do you think that with that kind of promises, which might be realistic, which might not be realistic, we might end up hurting the common man on the street?
Well, yeah, I mean, you were talking about, a doctor. Our problems start with us because of our lifestyle. We eat too much, the wrong kind of food, oily food, and then we have a heart problem. And then we go to the doctor, and as especially Pakistani doctors, they can misdiagnose, they can mistreat. And that's what happens with the IMF as well. In many cases, they don't really understand, the requirements of your local economy, and, the treatment that they give can make your conditions even worse. And so there are things, but then I wouldn't say that everything is wrong in the IMF program. You had to cut your fiscal deficit. You had to, keep your interest rates high. But now that you have stability, IMF programs just help you reach stability. They don't, give you a huge number of ideas for, having this kind of durable growth. And that's where, we
If
have
you allow
to
me
come
to
up
hop
with
into this
our own
conversation,
ideas.
Yeah, Dr. Hasan,
Please do.
Dr. Hasan, with that, of course, if you can also highlight, highlight about by the looks of it, it's all about expanding the volume of the economy. How can Pakistan do that right now?
And Dr. Saab, let me
I think-
piggyback on
I
that.
think
Dr.
very
Saab, allow me
interesting.
to actually piggyback on that question also, because you mentioned something very interesting. You said that political stability is very important for the country's economic stability.
Yeah, I'm coming to that,
My humble
Faisal
question
Saab.
was,
My point is that
my question was regarding one thing, and that is, even in Africa, investment goes on despite political instability. Why is it that Pakistan has to actually have
why is
that kind of
so
perfect?
special with us? Why is that so special with us? I don't know. Well, that's a very interesting analogy if you conduct that kind of analysis here. But here the question is, two things very important came up in this conversation. Number one is the tax collection. And again, going back to the question of political element, as I mentioned before, which Raja Faisal Saab has also highlighted, we saw that uh, FBR tried to bring the small business owners in the network, and we had Jamaat Islami Dharna going on. And then multiple factors add up to this thing. Now we have a very good step taken by the finance minister that, okay, whatever harsh measures he's taking, I am for it. Come what may, you pay zero taxes, but you must be registered as a taxpayer. It can be determined later who's paying how much tax. But first of all, everybody has to be registered, be that a telewala or be that a business giant, whatsoever that is. That is how this world works. We cannot have one set of rules for one segment of the society and putting the entire pressure of the economy and tax collection on one segment, that is the salaried class like myself and my friends, of course. So that's not happening, because that it is going to divide the society so badly, and then the cultural impact, if you translate the cultural impact into the economic impact, that is massive. Number two thing is, uh, you see the growth rate problem. Simple question is, yes, we spend more, as Raja Faisal Saab said, and Dr. Niaz also pointed out, we are spending more and earning less. Simple as that. And that's bad economy. That is the simple definition of bad economy. You are spending more and earning less. Now what happens? The IMF demands that you should squeeze your government size. So that is one thing. 6 ministries are being abolished as the government partner, the partner in the government, People's Party, they had in their manifesto, 17 ministries have to go. So maybe gradually, if we begin with 6, we will come to 17 one day, maybe anytime soon. But then it's just an administrative matter where those employees are going to be accommodated, how they are going to be compensated for the job loss, etc. That's a simple administrative matter. Let's not politicize it. So again, it is a political question. We have to come to agree to this thing that yes, this is not a simple question of finance and economics. It is a political question, and when you fire people from the government job, it will become a political issue. So in that sense, the government should be on strong political grounds to be able to handle it. And that is the way we need to find out that how they are able to do that, because the kind of political situation is one here, one there, and one dangling in the middle. That, of course, expands the problem, if not really aggravates it.
Right. Will you allow me to, Rafae, to actually comment on certain things that was
Yes,
said?
please do.
Regarding, the biggest problem and my beef with our intelligence here is that we keep on looking at problems rather than solutions, right? This repeated statement that the country needs political stability. I understand political stability is something that should be attained and it should be actually achieved. But the biggest problem is that where does this happen? In democracies, you don't get that kind of stability. Look at America, look at India, look at umpteen other countries where instability, political instability is always there. Because in India, every month you are holding an election in one state or the other. So that doesn't mean that things will stand still. The only problem with our approach is that the policy must be stable. And how do you do that? One, the Prime Minister actually, when last time he was coming to power, even when he was opposition leader, he spoke about a charter of economy. If you can't actually do that, at least convince all the sides that there are certain very important cardinal principles in our economics that have to be actually followed. If you do that, and regarding these job losses as a result of abolishing certain departments and then also right sizing or divesting from SOEs, the problem is not exactly that you are losing people even right now. The problem lies with the fact that you are actually not even planning for tomorrow. If you give somebody a golden handshake, they will have enough money to last for their lifetime. But the problem is at least you will stop this bleeding in the future. And that doesn't seem to be happening. So I think that these issues, especially after 18th Amendment, when we committed that we are going to have concurrent list abolished, all these ministries which are just standing there doing nothing, they have to go.
Right. That's a very important point that you raised, Farrukh Pitafi. With regards to that, we'll wrap up our first segment when we talk about this bailout package, this extended fund facility, which could be the last for the country if the suggestions by the IMF ensue. With that, I'd like to thank Dr. Niaz Murtaza and Dr. Hasan Zafar for being part of the conversation and sharing their time and insights in this show. We'll move towards the second topic with regards to the situation in the Middle East. Of course, the escalation that has transpired there. The whole world is witness to it. Of course, what happened? Iran retaliated against Israel in response to its hegemonic and expansionist designs. We also saw that the world community stood polarized. Of course, there was Israel's some of its allies that stood by its side, but we also saw that the world community, the rest of the majority of the world community, stood by the oppressed Palestinians, the oppressed people in the Middle East. And with regards to this escalation, we also saw a rise in the global oil prices, which climbed by 3%, and the global gold prices, they also had a significant rise. With regards to that, Faisal, how do you comment on the repercussions this escalation in the Middle East is having on the oil and gold and these commodities, these liquid commodities?
Yeah, Rafae, there was a statement which was circulating and it was being discussed as well, and that was from the American side, in which it was being said that they have actually stopped Israel from not attacking the nuclear sites of Iran. Rather, they can have other sites, and it was being suggested that they meant that the oil refineries and these kind of sites of Iran, they can be a target this time around of so that if they can, Israelis can contain Iran in terms of destroying their source of economy, and that is what actually triggered this sudden rise, and there was a sort of tension within this aspect of the economy. Oil is being hit, and obviously oil and gold, they are like cousins to each other. If you offend one, the other one gets offended anyway, and this is what is shaping up in the world right now. If we talk about the Middle Eastern countries, they don't want another conflict. They don't want another conflict that is, of course, an extension to Gaza itself. They want all of the stakeholders to be sitting on the table to negotiate peace. They even want the peace to be negotiated in Ukraine crisis as well, because we shouldn't be forgetting that the energy prices, they saw first hike when Ukrainian crisis was initiated, and I think this is where the economies, the fragile economies of the world, they couldn't stabilize themselves. Not even the Western countries. I mean, even if we talk about the EU countries, many of them, their economies are shattered right now because the fuel prices and the energy prices which are being experienced in Western world, they are unbearable for the household or for individuals even. And I think this is a matter of urgency, and that is why we saw that UN Security General, Secretary General, he even came up with this statement that this must end and a solution is needed to be implemented rather than the escalation. And I think it needs to be de-escalated so that, I mean, the Western world is getting affected, but what about the underdeveloped world or developing world like Pakistan? I mean, they are already seeing after effects of Ukrainian crisis. It would be yet another a plus to the crisis when we see that crisis taking place in terms of Iran. So whatever has happened so far, that needs to be dried up, and that needs to actually go away, and war isn't the solution. Rather, you know, a dialogue needs to be initiated to restore peace in the Middle East.
Of course, Farrukh, Pitafi, I'd also like your comments. As Raja Faisal mentioned that the United Nations Secretary General, he also called upon an end to these hostilities. But in response, we saw how Israel responded to that. There was a lot of criticism. They were too critical at the Secretary General, and they went a step ahead and also declared him persona non grata. How do you comment on that?
Right, and sadly, even though the UN wants to hold Netanyahu accountable, sadly, the man managed to actually appear in a UNGA summit, and there he even spoke and then left without any consequences. So that tells you which side has all the power, right? The UN has some titular power, but when it comes to the real power, it is nation states, whatever that might be. And while it was being said earlier that war is not a solution, it reminded me of another conflict or confrontation that went on in 2019 between India and Pakistan. At that time, because of Pulwama, there was this crisis that kept on escalating. And I found this savage eagerness on the part of Indian media to start a war. And at that time, I had to actually write a column, and I said, war is not a game. Right? People die. And particularly, one gentleman actually came on their channel and says, atom bomb maro, right? Throw a nuke Pakistan, right? And I said, look, champ, both countries are contiguous. If you nuke one, you are actually being clouded by the mushroom cloud, right? And there are going to be consequences for forever. Now, when you talk about you know, Iran and Israel, they are not contiguous, right? I understand when you were talking about oil prices and gold prices, one of the reasons why the prices are going up is this is the second oil producing country that has entered into a conflict. Earlier, Russia-Ukraine war is going on, and Russia has humongous reserves of oil, right? And now this also. So there is going to be some kind of pressure, but eventually that will stabilize. That is not the biggest lookout right now. The biggest lookout is that there can be a war that nobody can control, right? Israel might think it is a bully. Bullies usually start things and they don't understand the consequences. Right? And then there is this problem. There is a term that comes from Soviet Union or a former Soviet Union, but it is very important. It is called near abroad. So sphere of influence, so to speak. The problem is that Iran and Israel look at this, you know, converging area between them as their sphere of influence or near abroad. And that is also a source of conflict, because both are trying to, what you do in sports, in anything else, you usually actually show yourself to be big and powerful, and then you try to frighten the other side. Right now, all of this is happening on a very minor scale, but it can escalate to such a huge level that it can cause a war that might end humanity. So I think it is about time that both these sides, especially Israel, because Israel has unfortunately a leader who is very unpopular and who is corrupt and who has been caught at being corrupt, right? And because of that, he tried to overthrow their own Supreme Court by changing laws, and then the Supreme Court, it is not made of angels either, but it overthrew that law. And if he stops, Netanyahu stops, he fears that he might have to end up in a jail. So because of that, when October 7 happened, he did not go to immediately rescue the hostages, right? Israel, if it can kill people inside Tehran, if it can actually use bunker busters to kill people deep inside Lebanon, it can certainly rescue people who have been held hostage in Gaza.
Yes.
But what did he do? He declared war on an amorphous body called Hamas, because then you can continue a war because it is so abstract. And you saw that he actually went for all the bloodlust that was visible. And then now Lebanon. And if Lebanon doesn't give him that kind of extension of stay, then maybe it will be Iran or somewhere else. So with that kind of state of affairs, somebody needs to slap some sense into the man. If that cannot be done, one can only hope, although it is very strange how this jingoism politics works. Immediately what happens is your deeper thoughts are taken over, they are abolished. What happens is your lizard brain actually takes over, and that keeps on controlling your policy. So at this moment it seems that in Israel, jingoism also dominating. But that will have to go, and there will have to be some kind of correction.
Well, that wraps up the second segment for the day. Farrukh Pitafi, senior analyst, and Raja Faisal, geopolitical analyst. Thank you both for your time and being part of the conversation, of course. That wraps up all we have from the debate for today. See you same time tomorrow. Till then, take care.